The soft hum of the air conditioning filled the dimly lit bedroom. Daniel Carter sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his short-cropped brown hair. The glow from his laptop screen illuminated his tired face as he reviewed his company's latest financial report. It was late, but that wasn't unusual. Work had always demanded long hours, and as an investment consultant, he had learned to live with the grind. His wife, Emma, had long since fallen asleep, or so he thought. Her phone, placed screen down on the nightstand, vibrated softly. It was the third time in the last hour. Daniel frowned. Emma was never one to be glued to her phone. In the early days of their marriage, she would often complain about how he was always the busy one, how she wished he had more time for her. But lately, she seemed just as occupied, texting late at night, stepping out for private calls, and frequently staying late at the office. He reached for the phone, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. He wasn't the jealous type, but something felt off. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled his hand back. He trusted Emma. She was an HR manager at a mid-sized marketing firm, and her job did involve handling personnel issues that might require late-night calls. Maybe she was just dealing with a work crisis. Letting out a deep sigh, he shut his laptop and slid under the covers. Emma stirred beside him. "You're up late again," she murmured sleepily, her voice slightly hoarse. "Yeah," Daniel replied, rubbing his eyes. "Just finishing some reports." "You okay?" She turned toward him, her blonde hair slightly tousled. "Yeah, just exhausted. Work's been crazy lately." Daniel studied her face in the dim light. There was something distant about her expression, as if she were there but not really present. "You sure?" he asked. Emma gave him a small smile. "Of course. Let's just get some sleep." Daniel nodded, but as he closed his eyes, a nagging feeling remained at the back of his mind. The next morning, he woke up to an empty bed. He glanced at the clock, 6:30 a.m. Emma usually didn't leave this early. He walked downstairs to the kitchen, expecting to see her sipping coffee like she did every morning, but she was gone. A note on the counter caught his eye. "Had to go in early. Big project deadline. See you tonight. Love you." Daniel exhaled slowly, staring at the note. Maybe he was overthinking things. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, his phone buzzed. Nathan Cooper, his best friend, had texted. "Hey man, wanna grab lunch today?" Daniel smiled and texted back. "Yeah. Noon okay?" Nathan had been his closest friend since college. They had gone through everything together. Late-night study sessions, bad breakups, and even starting their own families around the same time. Nathan had always been a reliable, grounded guy. If anyone could help Daniel clear his mind, it was him. At noon, Daniel met Nathan at a small downtown cafe. They ordered their usual, burgers and fries. "So, how's work?" Nathan asked, taking a sip of his soda. Daniel shrugged. "Busy as hell. The usual." He hesitated before adding, "Emma's been acting a little different lately." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "She's working late a lot. Texting at weird hours." "I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just being paranoid." Nathan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Listen, if something feels off, trust your gut. I'm not saying jump to conclusions, but don't ignore the signs either." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe I'll talk to her about it tonight." But deep down, he wasn't sure if he wanted to hear the answer. That night, Emma came home late again. Daniel was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but his mind was elsewhere. Emma walked in, dropping her purse on the counter. "Long day," she sighed. Daniel studied her carefully. Her makeup was freshly applied, her perfume strong. It didn't seem like she had just come from a stressful workday. "Late meeting?" he asked. "Yeah. The executive team is pushing for a major restructuring. I swear, my boss is working us to death," she said, rolling her eyes. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had met Emma's boss, David Wallace, before. A charismatic, confident man in his early 40s, divorced, with a reputation for being a bit too friendly with his female employees. He forced a smile. "That sounds rough." Emma kissed him on the cheek. "It is. I'm exhausted. I'm gonna take a shower." Daniel nodded, watching as she disappeared into the bathroom. As soon as he heard the water running, he felt a surge of impulse. He walked over to her purse, hesitating only for a second before opening it. His fingers brushed against her phone. He knew this was crossing a line, but something inside him, a deep, nagging suspicion, pushed him forward. He turned on the screen. A single notification glowed at the top. New message, David Wallace. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The room suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the words. His wife was having an affair with her boss. For a long moment, he just stood there, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The reality of it crashed down on him like a wave, drowning him in a mix of rage, betrayal, and heartbreak. The sound of the shower running in the background felt distant, unreal. He had spent years building a life with Emma, trusting her, loving her, and now, in a matter of seconds, that trust had been shattered. As the water shut off and Emma stepped out of the bathroom, humming softly, Daniel placed the phone back in her purse and walked toward the kitchen. His hands were shaking, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Daniel's hands tightened into fists as he leaned against the kitchen counter. His mind raced, replaying the message over and over again. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. The words burned into his brain like a brand. He had never been the kind of man to jump to conclusions, but there was no mistaking what he had just seen. Emma, his wife, the woman he had built a life with, was sleeping with her boss. A deep, shuddering breath filled his lungs, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside him. Footsteps padded down the hallway. Emma, she entered the kitchen, her damp hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked fresh, content, like a woman who had no idea her husband had just uncovered her secret. "Babe, everything okay?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of water. Daniel forced a smile. He couldn't confront her yet, not until he had more proof. "Yeah," he said, his voice even, "just tired from work." She walked up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I know the feeling." Daniel stiffened. Her touch, which had once been a source of comfort, now felt foreign, tainted. He turned and kissed her forehead. It took every ounce of self-control he had. As she pulled away, he watched her carefully. Did she suspect anything? No. She was too at ease, too comfortable in her deception. And that made his decision even clearer. He needed to catch her in the act, laying the trap. Daniel spent the next few days playing the role of the oblivious husband. He acted normal, kissed Emma goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day, and even pretended to be too busy with work to pay attention to her late nights. But behind the scenes, he was preparing. First, he installed a GPS tracker on her car. It was a simple device, easy to hide under the dashboard. Second, he went to an old friend, Kyle Reynolds, a private investigator he had met through a past work connection. Kyle listened intently as Daniel explained the situation. "She's cheating on me with her boss," Daniel said, his voice cold. "I need proof. Solid proof." Kyle nodded. "You want photos, messages, or both?" "Everything." The investigator smirked. "Consider it done." Daniel clenched his fists. If Emma thought she could betray him and walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. The first sign of proof. 2 nights later, the first piece of evidence came in. Daniel sat in his car, parked outside a small boutique hotel just a few miles from Emma's office. Kyle had sent him a message along with several photos. One image showed Emma walking into the hotel lobby, her hand resting on the arm of David Wallace. Another, taken later that night, showed them exiting together, David's hand placed possessively on her lower back. Daniel's stomach churned with rage. Seeing the text message had been painful, but this was undeniable. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Kyle's next message arrived. "Kyle, they've been meeting here at least twice a week. Want me to dig into financials? See if she's using your money for this?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "Daniel, yes. I need to know everything." "Kyle, got it. I'll send a full report soon." Daniel exhaled sharply, his mind now focused on only one thing: revenge. Confronting the affair partner. The next morning, Daniel walked into Wallace & Company. Marketing, the firm where Emma worked. He had never liked David Wallace. The man was sleek, overconfident, and far too familiar with his female employees. But now Daniel wanted to put his fist through his smug face. He approached the receptionist. "I need to see David Wallace. It's urgent." The woman hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" Daniel's gaze darkened. "No, but tell him it's about Emma Carter." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly, and within minutes, Daniel was escorted into David's office. The man behind the desk looked up with mild curiosity. He was in his 40s, salt and pepper hair neatly styled, wearing an expensive navy blue suit. "Mr. Carter," he greeted, leaning back in his chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Daniel stepped forward, dropping a thick folder of photographs onto the desk. David glanced down. His expression barely changed, but Daniel noticed the slight tension in his jaw. "You've been sleeping with my wife," Daniel said, his voice deadly calm. "Don't bother denying it. I have proof." David exhaled, closing the folder. "Look, Daniel. Don't Daniel me," he snapped. "You're a disgusting, pathetic excuse for a man. And here's what's going to happen." David raised an eyebrow, but he didn't speak. "You're going to fire Emma. Quietly. No severance, no recommendations. If you don't, I'll send these photos, along with your financial records, to the company board." David's eyes flickered. "You had me investigated?" Daniel smirked. "Let's just say I know where all your skeletons are buried. The affairs, the questionable expense reports, the bribery." David's face paled. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would." Daniel leaned in. "And trust me, your bosses won't hesitate to destroy you to protect their reputation." Silence stretched between them. Finally, David sighed. "Fine. I'll cut her loose." Daniel straightened. "Good. Do it today." Without another word, he turned and walked out. That evening, Daniel sat at home, waiting. Emma arrived earlier than usual, her expression tense. She threw her purse onto the table and turned to him, eyes blazing. "I got fired today," she said sharply. Daniel kept his face neutral. "Oh." Emma narrowed her eyes. "Don't act like you don't know. Someone told HR about my relationship with David." He tilted his head. "Relationship?" She hesitated. I know everything, Emma." His voice was low, dangerous. "I know about the hotel, the texts, the late nights." Emma's face drained of color. Daniel, I can explain." "No," he stood up. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to lie to me anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" He let out a bitter laugh. "You risked our marriage for a meaningless affair?" Emma reached for his hand. "I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this." Daniel pulled away. "No. You destroyed us," she sobbed, sinking into a chair. "I didn't want to lose you." Daniel's expression hardened. "Then you shouldn't have betrayed me." Emma shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. "We can go to therapy?" Daniel exhaled slowly, looking down at his wife, the woman he had once loved more than anything. "No, Emma," he said, his voice like steel. "We're done." Her lips trembled. What are you saying?" "I'm divorcing you." The words hit her like a slap. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Please, Daniel." But he had already made up his mind. This was only the beginning of her downfall, and she had no idea what was coming next. Emma collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she gasped for air between sobs. The weight of Daniel's words crushed her. Divorce. She had expected anger. She had even expected him to pull away for a while. But this? She never thought he would actually leave. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "I can fix this." But he was unmoved. His decision was final. "I'll have the divorce papers drawn up soon," he said coldly, grabbing his car keys. "You should start thinking about where you're going to live." Emma's head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. "What?" Daniel's stare was empty. "You think you're staying here?" Her breath hitched. "This is my home too." Daniel scoffed. "No, Emma. It was our home. Before you decided to destroy our marriage." She shook her head violently, scrambling to her feet. "Please, Daniel, don't do this." I made a mistake, but we can fix it. You love me. Daniel clenched his jaw. Not anymore. Emma's heart shattered at his words. She reached for him again, but he stepped back. The distance between them, physical, emotional, irreversible, was suffocating. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days, Daniel continued, his voice steady. When I get back, I expect you to be gone. Emma's knees buckled, and she sank back onto the couch. This wasn't happening. She had lost her job. Now, she was losing her husband. And soon, she would lose everything else too. Daniel's next move. Daniel didn't go to a hotel. He went straight to his lawyer. Sitting across from Mark Hastings, a top-tier divorce attorney, he laid out everything: the affair, the evidence, Emma's betrayal. Mark skimmed through the photos and reports, nodding in approval. You have a solid case. Since you were the faithful spouse, and we can prove infidelity, we can push for an outcome that heavily favors you. Daniel exhaled sharply. I want the house. I don't want to pay her a cent in alimony. And I want her reputation to reflect what she's done. Mark smirked. I like the way you think. We'll argue that she wasted marital assets on her affair. Hotel stays, gifts, anything she spent on him. That will eliminate any claim she has to your money. Daniel's expression darkened. And her job? Mark chuckled. Already taken care of. I know a few people at Wallace & Company. David Wallace won't be the only one facing consequences. Daniel's lips curled into a grim smile. Emma had thrown away their marriage for a cheap office affair. Now, she was about to pay the price. Emma's downfall begins. 3 days later, Emma sat across from her own lawyer, trembling as she read through the divorce petition. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Daniel was not only taking the house, but he was also blocking her from receiving any financial support. She looked up, her voice shaking. This isn't fair. Her lawyer, a woman named Rachel Green, sighed. Emma, I won't sugarcoat this. Your husband has an ironclad case. He has proof of the affair, evidence of misused marital funds, and an aggressive legal team. You're in a bad position. Emma's stomach twisted. But what about my share of the house? I contributed to it too. Rachel's lips thinned. It won't matter. Since the mortgage and ownership are in Daniel's name, and because of the affair, a judge is likely to rule in his favor. You'll be left with almost nothing. Emma's hands shook. This can't be happening. Rachel hesitated. There's something else. Emma's heart pounded. What? Rachel slid a manila folder across the table. Your name has been flagged in an internal company investigation. Apparently, someone reported your affair with David Wallace, and the company is reviewing your professional conduct. Emma's head snapped up. No, they wouldn't. Rachel gave her a knowing look. Office affairs, especially with superiors, can lead to termination. You were already fired, but if they officially document misconduct, you'll struggle to find another job in the industry. Emma felt like she was drowning. Her career was over. Her marriage was over. And now, she was facing financial ruin. This isn't happening, she whispered. But it was. And she had no one to blame but herself. Emma tries to beg for mercy. That night, Emma went to Daniel's hotel. She had no choice. She needed to see him, to make him understand that she couldn't survive without him. Standing outside his door, she hesitated before knocking. A few seconds later, Daniel opened it. He didn't look surprised to see her. What do you want, Emma? He asked coldly. Her throat tightened. He was looking at her like she was a stranger. She swallowed. I need to talk to you. Daniel sighed but stepped aside, letting her in. She took a shaky breath, wringing her hands together. Daniel, I know I messed up. I was selfish, and I betrayed you. But I never stopped loving you. His jaw clenched. Emma, love isn't just a word. It's actions. And your actions proved that I meant nothing to you. Tears welled up in her eyes. That's not true. I was weak, but I love you. Please, just give me another chance. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then, he spoke. No. The finality in his voice hit her like a brick wall. She shook her head frantically. Please. Daniel stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You weren't sorry when you were sneaking around. You weren't sorry when you were lying to my face. You're only sorry now because you got caught. Emma broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'll do anything, Daniel. I'll sign a post-nup. I'll go to therapy. Just please, don't leave me like this. Daniel's stare was unwavering. He felt nothing for her anymore. You already lost me, Emma. Her breath hitched as she realized there was no going back. Daniel had already moved on. And she? She was completely alone. Emma sat in her empty apartment, staring blankly at the eviction notice in her hands. The walls were bare, the furniture gone. Everything that had once made this place feel like a home was packed away or sold. She had officially lost everything. Her job? Gone. Her career? Destroyed. Her marriage? Over. The divorce had gone exactly as Daniel wanted. She walked away with nothing. No house, no financial support, and no claim to any assets. She had begged, pleaded, even tried to appeal for a better settlement, but Daniel's legal team was ruthless. The judge saw no reason to grant her anything, considering her blatant infidelity and how she had misused marital funds for her affair. And now? She had nowhere to go. Her reputation in ruins. Emma had thought that losing Daniel was the worst thing that could happen. She was wrong. The fallout of her affair had spread like wildfire, not just in her office but in the entire industry. It turned out that Daniel had contacts too. Her name was blacklisted from every major company in the city. She tried applying for other jobs, but the second they saw her termination record from Wallace and Company, doors slammed in her face. Even smaller firms didn't want to take a risk on someone fired for misconduct. She had no income, no way to support herself, and no one to turn to. David Wallace had moved on. Desperate, Emma tried to reach out to David Wallace. Surely, after everything they had been through, he wouldn't just leave her to suffer alone, right? She sent him a message. Emma, David, I need to talk. I don't know where else to go. No response. She tried again. Emma, please, just give me 5 minutes. I lost everything. I just need help. Still nothing. Finally, she called him. Straight to voicemail. That's when she realized David had blocked her. Of course he had. The moment he was fired, he had cut ties with her completely. She had been nothing more than a distraction to him. A cheap affair that cost him his job. She was never special, never important. And now, she was on her own. A visit to her parents. With no other options, Emma packed a small bag and drove to her parents' house. She hadn't spoken to them much since the divorce. They had taken Daniel's side. She parked outside and took a deep breath before knocking on the door. Her mother, Margaret, opened it. Her expression was unreadable as she took in Emma's appearance. Sunken eyes, messy hair, clear signs of exhaustion. Emma tried to force a smile. Hi, Mom. Margaret sighed, stepping aside. Come in. Emma entered, clutching her bag tightly. The house smelled of fresh-baked bread, the warmth of a home she had lost. Her father, Richard, was seated at the dining table, reading a newspaper. He glanced up, frowning. Emma. She swallowed hard. I need a place to stay. Just for a little while. Margaret crossed her arms. And where's your husband? Emma's throat tightened. Daniel left me. Richard scoffed. Can you blame him? Emma flinched. Dad, please. Margaret sighed. What did you expect, Emma? You betrayed him. You threw away a man who loved you for. What? A fling? Tears burned in her eyes. I know I messed up. She inhaled shakily. I have nowhere else to go. Her parents exchanged a look. Then, Richard set his newspaper down. We're not going to enable your mistakes. Emma's heart pounded. I'm your daughter. And Daniel was like a son to us, Margaret replied softly. Do you know he still checks in on us? Even after everything you did? Emma's breath hitched. Daniel still cared about them. More than he cared about her. Margaret's face was firm. You can stay for a week. After that, you need to figure out your own life. Emma nodded, biting her lip to keep from breaking down completely. She had nowhere else to go. Daniel's new beginning. While Emma's life was crumbling, Daniel was thriving. He had thrown himself into his work, focusing on his business and his future. The divorce had been a painful process, but once it was finalized, he felt free. For the first time in years, he could breathe without the weight of betrayal on his chest. And the best part? Emma was completely out of his life. One evening, Daniel sat in a cafe, going over some paperwork when he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. He turned and saw Sophie, a woman he had met months ago through mutual friends. She smiled. "Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the seat across from him. "Of course." As they talked, Daniel realized something. He was finally happy again. Emma's betrayal had almost broken him, but now he was ready to move forward without her, and he had no regrets. Emma's downward spiral. Emma sat on a park bench, staring at the crumpled resume in her hands. She had been to 5 interviews this week, and every single one ended the same way. "Sorry, but we've decided to go with another candidate." No one wanted to hire a former HR executive who had been fired for an affair with her boss. The industry was small. Her reputation was permanently ruined. She had burned every bridge. Her parents had let her stay with them for a week, but once that time was up, they forced her to leave. They didn't trust her, didn't want to enable her mistakes. She had moved into a cheap motel, spending what little money she had left from her personal savings. Now, she was weeks away from homelessness. Her hands shook as she checked her phone. She had sent countless messages to friends, old colleagues, anyone who might help, but no one responded. She was completely alone. For the first time in her life, she understood what true regret felt like. A desperate attempt. One night, Emma sat on her motel bed, scrolling through her phone, and that's when a terrible idea crossed her mind. She clicked on Daniel's name. Her finger hovered over the call button. Would he even pick up? Would he even care? She took a shaky breath and pressed it. The phone rang once, twice. Then, he answered. "Emma." His voice was calm, distant. Her chest tightened. "Daniel, I." She choked on her words. He was silent, waiting. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry." A long pause. Then, Daniel sighed. "Why are you calling me?" She sniffled. "I lost everything." Another silence. "I know," he said coldly. "That was your choice." Her breath hitched. "Daniel, please. I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking. I threw everything away, and now I have nothing. Please, just—" She swallowed her pride. "I need help." His response was immediate. "No." Emma froze. Daniel's voice was firm. "I gave you everything, Emma. My love, my trust, my loyalty. And you threw it all away for a man who doesn't even care about you." She sobbed. I know, and I regret it every single day. But that doesn't change what happened." His tone never wavered. "You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." Emma shook her head violently. "Please, Daniel, I can't live like this. I have nothing. I don't even have a home." "That's not my problem," he said, his voice colder than ever. Tears blurred her vision. "I love you." A sharp, bitter laugh came through the phone. "You don't even know what love is, Emma." Her heart shattered. Then, his final words came like a death sentence. "I don't ever want to hear from you again." And with that, he hung up. Emma stared at the screen. Daniel was gone. Forever. Daniel's new life. Months passed. Daniel had moved forward. He had thrown himself into his business, expanding his company and securing new contracts. His financial success only grew. But more importantly, he was finally happy again, and he wasn't alone. One evening, he walked into a small restaurant, smiling as Sophie waved at him from a table. She had been a friend at first, but over time, they had grown closer. Now, he was ready to let someone in again. Sitting across from her, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. A fresh start. And for the first time, he didn't think about Emma at all. Emma's final fate. Meanwhile, Emma's life continued to spiral. She moved from motel to motel, burning through her last bit of savings. Her desperation grew. One day, she swallowed what little pride she had left and applied for a waitress job. The owner barely glanced at her resume. "We don't hire homewreckers," he said bluntly. Humiliation burned through her. No one would give her a second chance. She had truly lost everything. One night, she sat alone in a shelter, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time, she realized this was her fault, no one else's. She had destroyed her own life. And now, she had to live with it. Forever.